Galactic Transit Station Omega-7 never slept, and neither did the thousands of beings who passed through its massive corridors every cycle. The station hung in the void between three major trade routes, making it one of the busiest hubs in the known galaxy. And Laura Bennett had called it home for the past 4 years. She worked in the emergency medical bay as a xenobiologist, treating injuries and illnesses for species that most humans had never even heard of. It was challenging work that required patience, quick thinking, and an ability to stay calm when facing creatures that could tear her apart with a single swipe of their claws. Laura had seen almost everything during her time on the station, from tiny Valoran diplomats with their delicate insectoid bodies to massive Graxian traders who stood twice her height. She had treated wounds, delivered offspring, and held the hands of dying beings from dozens of worlds. But nothing in her experience had prepared her for what walked through the medical bay doors that morning. The Kethrani warrior stood nearly 9 feet tall, his armored scales gleaming under the station lights like polished obsidian. Razor-sharp claws extended from his fingers, each one capable of slicing through steel, and his eyes burned with the golden fire that marked his species as the most feared predators in the galaxy. Everyone in the medical bay froze when Commander Vrathkar entered. Nurses stepped back against the walls. Patients went silent, and even Dr. Henry Shaw, who had served in 3 war zones, felt his heart pound against his ribs. The Kethrani were legends of terror throughout known space. They had evolved on a death world where everything hunted everything else, and they had risen to the top of the food chain through sheer brutality and cunning. Their military conquered dozens of systems before joining the Galactic Council, and even now, centuries later, other species crossed to the opposite side of corridors. When a Kethrani approached, the Lavra noticed something that the others missed. The massive warrior was not alone. Clutched against his chest, nearly hidden by his enormous arms, was a small figure wrapped in dark cloth. Lavra could see tiny claws poking out from the fabric, and a pair of golden eyes peering out with obvious fear. "I require the human," Vrathkar said, his voice a deep rumble that vibrated through the floor. His eyes scanned the room until they locked onto Laura. "You are Laura Bennett, yes." Laura stepped forward, despite every survival instinct screaming at her to run. She had learned long ago that showing fear to predator species only made things worse. "I am," she said, keeping her voice steady. "How can I help you, Commander?" Vrathkar moved closer, and Laura had to tilt her head back to meet his gaze. Up close, she could see the scars that crossed his scales, evidence of countless battles fought and won. This was a warrior who had killed more beings than she could count, and yet something in his eyes looked almost desperate. "I must leave," he said. "Diplomatic emergency requiring my immediate presence on Kethra Prime. I cannot take my daughter with me, and I cannot trust her to the standard nursery protocols." Laura blinked in surprise. The Kethrani had their own caretaker systems, elaborate facilities designed specifically for their young. Why would a commander bypass those options? "Surely there are Kethrani facilities on the station," Lavra said carefully. "Your people have—" "I know what my people have," Vrathkar interrupted, but his voice held no anger. "I am not asking for Kethrani care. I am asking for you." The medical bay had gone completely silent. Laura could feel every eye on her, could sense the confusion and disbelief radiating from her colleagues. An apex predator, the most dangerous species in the galaxy, was asking a human to care for his child. "Why me?" Lavra asked. "We've only spoken once before. When I treated your shoulder wound last cycle." Vrathkar carefully pulled back the cloth, revealing his daughter fully. Skira was small for a Kethrani child, barely reaching Laura's waist, with scales that had not yet hardened into armor. Her golden eyes were wide with fear, and she pressed closer to her father's chest when she saw all the strangers staring at her. because my people have watched yours for a very long time, Hrothgar said quietly. We know things about humans that humans do not know about themselves. I watched you that day in the medical bay, how you treated me without fear, how you spoke to the frightened Valoran child in the next bed. I saw what you are, and what am I? Lavra asked. Someone who protects young that are not her own, Hrothgar replied. Someone who would die before letting harm come to a child in her care. This is rare in the galaxy, Lavra Bennett. Most species protect only their own offspring, but humans are different. He knelt down, bringing himself closer to Laura's height, and gently extended Skira toward her. The little Kathrani whimpered and tried to cling to her father, but Hrothgar spoke softly to her in their native tongue. Sounds that rumbled and clicked in patterns Lavra could not understand. Skira is 3 cycles old, Hrothgar said. She is afraid of strangers, and she does not trust easily. Her mother died in battle last year, and I am all she has. I would not leave her with anyone I did not trust completely. Lavra looked at the small predator child, saw the fear and vulnerability beneath those golden eyes, and felt something shift in her chest. She had never cared for a Kathrani before, did not know their customs or their needs. But she understood one thing perfectly. This child was scared and alone. And her father was trusting Laura with the most precious thing in his universe. How long will you be gone? Lavra asked. Unknown, Hrothgar admitted. Days, perhaps weeks. I will send word when I can. Lavra reached out slowly, letting Skira see her hands, showing the child that she meant no harm. I will take care of her, she said. I promise. Hrothgar's eyes held something that might have been relief or perhaps gratitude. He spoke again to Skira, then gently transferred her into Laura's arms. The little Kathrani was heavier than she looked, her small body dense with muscle and developing bone, and her claws gripped Laura's uniform tightly enough to tear small holes in the fabric. Thank you, Hrothgar said, rising to his full height. When this is over, you will understand why I chose you. My people have always known. Then he was gone, moving through the medical bay doors and disappearing into the crowded corridors beyond, leaving Laura holding a terrified apex predator child while every being in the room stared at her in stunned silence. Skira began to cry, a high keening sound that echoed off the metal walls. And Laura did the only thing she knew how to do. She held the child close, spoke softly, and promised that everything would be all right. She had no idea what she had just agreed to, or how this small decision would change everything she thought she knew about humanity's place in the galaxy. The first 3 days were the hardest that Laura had ever experienced in her life. Skira refused to eat, refused to sleep, and spent most of her time huddled in the corner of Laura's quarters with her small claws extended and her golden eyes, watching every movement with predator intensity. Laura tried everything she could think of. She researched Kathrani dietary needs and prepared meals of raw protein that should have been perfect for a growing predator child. But Skira would not touch them. She dimmed the lights to match the darker conditions of Kethra Prime, but Skira still would not rest. She spoke softly and moved slowly, but the little Kathrani flinched at every sound. You need to eat something, Lavra said gently on the 3rd night, pushing a plate of prepared meat closer to where Skira crouched. Your father would want you to stay strong, Skira hissed at her, a sound that would have sent most beings running for safety. But Lavra simply sat down on the floor a few feet away and waited. Dr. Henry Shaw visited that evening, bringing medical supplies, and concern etched across his weathered face. He was older than Laura by 20 years, with gray hair and kind eyes that had seen too much suffering during his career. The whole station is talking about this, he said quietly, watching Skira from the doorway. A Kathrani commander leaving his child with a human. Half the traders think it is some kind of trap, and the other half think Vrathkar has lost his mind. It is not a trap, Lavra replied without taking her eyes off Skira. He was desperate. I could see it in his eyes. But why you? Henry asked. The Kethrani have their own systems, their own people trained for exactly this situation. Lavra shook her head slowly. He said his people have been watching humans. He said they know things about us that we do not know about ourselves. Henry frowned at that. His scientific curiosity clearly sparked. I could look into that, he offered. The station archives go back centuries. If the Kethrani have been observing humanity, there might be records. Please, Lavra said. Anything that helps me understand what is happening here. Henry left to begin his research, and Lavra returned her attention to Skira. The little Kethrani had not moved from her corner, but something in her posture had shifted. She was still afraid, still defensive, but she was also watching Lara with something that might have been curiosity. The next day, Counselor Meredith came to visit. She was a Valoran diplomat, her insectoid body covered in iridescent plates that caught the light as she moved. And her compound eyes regarded Lavra with obvious suspicion. This arrangement is highly irregular, Meredith said, her voice clicking and buzzing through her translator. The Kethrani do not trust outsiders with their young. They are the most protective species in the known galaxy. I must ask what hold you have over Commander Vrathkar. Lavra felt her patience wearing thin. She had barely slept in 3 days. Skira still was not eating. And now she was being accused of manipulating a 9-foot predator warrior. I have no hold over anyone, Lavra said firmly. He asked me to help, and I agreed. That is all. Meredith made a sound that her translator rendered as skepticism. Humans are soft, she said. Weak compared to most species. Why would an apex predator trust prey with something so precious? Before Lara could respond, a small voice interrupted them. She is not prey. Both Lavra and Meredith turned to look at Skira. The little Kethrani had risen from her corner and was standing with her small claws clenched at her sides. Her golden eyes fixed on the Valoran diplomat. My father says humans are different, Skira continued, her young voice shaking slightly. He says they protect young that are not theirs. He says that makes them stronger than predators. Meredith stared at the child for a long moment, then turned and left without another word. Lavra watched her go, then slowly approached Skira. That was very brave of you, Lavra said softly. Standing up like that. Skira's defensive posture relaxed slightly. The bug lady was being mean to you, she said. Father says we should defend those who defend us. Lavra felt tears prick at her eyes. 3 days of stress and exhaustion and worry suddenly threatened to overwhelm her, but she forced herself to stay calm. Are you hungry? She asked. The food is still there if you want it. Skira hesitated, then slowly walked over to the plate of meat that Lavra had prepared. She sniffed it carefully, her predator instincts assessing the offering, then began to eat with small, careful bites. That night, when Lavra lay down to sleep, she felt a small weight press against her back. Skira had crept out of her corner and curled up behind Lavra. Her tiny claws gripping the human shirt. Laura did not move, did not speak, barely even breathed. She simply let the exhausted child rest against her warmth and protection. The next morning, Henry Shaw returned with a datapad full of information. His eyes were wide with excitement as he shared what he had found. There are records, he said, keeping his voice low so as not to disturb the still sleeping Skira. Old records, buried deep in the archives. The Kethrani have been observing humanity since before we achieved spaceflight. Why? Lavra asked. Because we are an anomaly, Henry explained. Most species in the galaxy only protect their own offspring. It is simple evolutionary logic. But humans are different. We adopt children from other families, other cultures, even other species. We risk our lives for young that share none of our genetic material. He pulled up a specific file on the datapad. There is a note here from a Kethrani observer who visited Earth 300 years ago. He watched a human village for 6 months and reported something that shocked his superiors. What did he see? Lavra asked Henry Reed from the file. The humans took in orphaned young from other villages, even when resources were scarce. They fed these children before feeding themselves. They fought and died to protect offspring that were not their own. This behavior is unprecedented in apex predator societies. Lavra looked down at Skira, still sleeping peacefully against her side, and finally began to understand. The Kethrani had not chosen her randomly. They had chosen her because she was human, because humans possessed something that even the deadliest predators in the galaxy recognized as valuable: the instinct to protect any child, regardless of species, regardless of cost. They trust us, Lavra whispered. The apex predators trust us with their young because they know we will die before letting anything happen to them. Henry nodded slowly. It appears so. And according to these records, the Kethrani are not the only ones who know this secret. Skira stirred against Laura's side, her golden eyes blinking open. Hungry, she mumbled sleepily. Laura smiled and reached down to stroke the child's small head. Then let us get you some breakfast. For the first time since Rathkar had left, Lavra felt like she might actually be able to do this. 1 week passed, and Lavra fell into a comfortable routine with Skira. Mornings began with breakfast and language lessons, as Lavra taught the young Kethrani human words, while Skira taught Lavra simple phrases in her native tongue. Afternoons were spent in the medical bay, where Skira watched with fascination as Lavra treated patients of all species. Evenings brought quiet time in their quarters, where Lavra read stories from Earth, while Skira curled up against her side. The bond between them grew stronger each day. Skira no longer flinched when Lavra moved suddenly, no longer extended her claws when strangers approached. She had begun to trust, to feel safe, to believe that this soft human would protect her. Captain Derek Cole stopped by one afternoon to check on them. He was the station's security chief, a tall man with broad shoulders and a serious face that rarely smiled. He had served in the military before taking this posting, and he carried himself with the rigid discipline of a career soldier. Commander Vrathkar sent a message, he told Lavra. The situation on Kethra Prime is complicated. It may be delayed another week, possibly 2. Lavra nodded, glancing over at Skira, who was playing with a puzzle toy that Henry had found for her. We will manage, she said. She is doing well. Cole followed her gaze and shook his head slightly. Never thought I would see a Kethrani child playing peacefully on this station, he admitted. Usually their kind keeps to themselves, never lets outsiders near their young. Whatever Vrathkar sees in you humans, it must be something special. Before Lavra could respond, the station alarms began to scream. Red lights flashed across every corridor, and the automated warning system announced what Lavra had feared since arriving at this remote outpost. Hollow Raiders had breached the outer defenses. The Hollow Raiders were pirates of the worst kind. They attacked stations and ships, taking cargo and hostages, killing anyone who resisted. They operated in this sector because the patrol routes were thin and help was always far away. Get to the safe room, Cole ordered, already pulling his weapon. Take the child and stay hidden until I send the all clear. Lavra grabbed Skira, who had gone rigid with fear at the sound of the alarms, and ran. She knew the station layout well enough to navigate the back corridors, the maintenance tunnels that most visitors never saw. Her medical training had required memorizing evacuation routes, and now that knowledge might save their lives. Where are we going? Skira whispered, her small claws digging into Laura's arms. Somewhere safe, Lavra promised. I will not let anything happen to you. They reached a maintenance access point, and Laura pulled open the hatch, lowering herself and Skira into the cramped tunnel below. Emergency lighting cast everything in dim red, and the sounds of distant weapons fire echoed through the metal walls. Laura moved as quietly as she could, carrying Skira through the narrow passages toward a storage room that she knew would be overlooked by raiders searching for valuable targets. Her heart pounded against her ribs, but she forced herself to stay calm, to keep moving, to protect the child in her arms. They were almost there when a voice called out behind them. "Well, what do we have here?" Laura spun around to find 3 raiders blocking the tunnel behind them. They wore mismatched armor and carried weapons that looked cobbled together from stolen parts. Their faces were hidden behind helmets, but Laura could hear the cruel amusement in their voices. "A human and some kind of alien kid," one of them said. "Not much value in the human, but that little creature might fetch a good price in the right market." Skira whimpered and pressed closer to Laura, and something shifted inside the human woman. Fear transformed into something harder, something fiercer. She had promised Hrothgar that she would protect his daughter, had promised Skira that nothing would happen to her, and she would keep those promises, even if it cost her everything. "You will not touch her," Laura said. Her voice low and steady, the raiders laughed. "And what are you going to do about it, Softskin?" One of them mocked. "You humans are prey. Everyone knows that." Laura spotted a maintenance tool on the wall nearby, a heavy wrench used for emergency repairs. She shifted Skira behind her, placing her own body between the child and the raiders, and grabbed the wrench with her free hand. "I will do whatever I have to," Laura replied. The raiders stopped laughing. They had expected the human to beg, to surrender, to offer the child in exchange for her own life. They had not expected defiance, had not expected the cold determination in Laura's eyes. "Take her," the lead raider ordered. They rushed forward, and Laura swung the wrench with all her strength. It connected with the first raider's helmet, sending him crashing into the wall. The second raider grabbed Laura's arm, but she kicked out at his knee, driving him back. Pain exploded through her side as the third raider's weapon grazed her, but she kept fighting, kept swinging, kept placing herself between Skira and danger. "Run," Laura gasped to Skira. "The storage room at the end." "Hide there. I will not leave you," Skira cried. "Go, or," Laura shouted, pushing the child toward the end of the tunnel. "I will find you. I promise." Skira ran, her small legs carrying her into the darkness, and Laura turned back to face the remaining raiders. Blood ran down her side from the wound, and her vision was starting to blur. But she raised the wrench again and prepared to fight until she could not fight anymore. Then a shadow moved behind the raiders. Something massive and terrifying, and a voice like thunder echoed through the tunnel. "You dare threaten a child under human protection?" The Kethrani warrior struck without warning. Claws flashed through the dim light, and the raiders fell before they could even scream. In seconds, all 3 were dead, and the warriors stepped over their bodies to approach Laura. Laura raised the wrench with shaking hands, ready to defend herself against this new threat. But the warrior raised her empty hands in a gesture of peace. "I am Zena," she said, "elder of the Kethrani. Hrothgar sent me to check on his daughter. I arrived just as the attack began." Laura lowered the wrench, her strength finally failing. "Skira," she gasped. End of the tunnel. Storage room. Zena's golden eyes studied Laura with an intensity that seemed to pierce through to her soul. "You are injured," she observed. "Yet you fought 3 armed raiders with a maintenance tool. You protected a child of my species with your own body. I promised." Laura said simply. Zena moved past her toward the storage room, then paused and looked back. "Now I understand," she said quietly. "Now I see what my people have always known about yours." Laura slumped against the tunnel wall, clutching her wounded side, and hoped that Skira was safe. Nothing else mattered. Laura woke in the medical bay with bright lights above her and the steady beep of monitoring equipment beside her. Pain throbbed through her side where the raider's weapon had struck, but the sharp agony had dulled to a manageable ache. Someone had treated her wound while she was unconscious. She tried to sit up, but a small weight on her arm stopped her. Skira was curled up in a chair beside the bed, her tiny claws gripping Laura's sleeve as she slept. Even in rest, the young Kethrani refused to let go of the human who had fought for her. "She has not left your side since we brought you here," a deep voice said. Laura turned her head to find Xena standing near the doorway. The Kethrani elder was smaller than Rathkar, but still towered over most species on the station. Her scales had faded from black to gray with age, and her golden eyes held the wisdom of centuries. "The attack?" Laura asked, her voice rough-ended. Xena replied. Captain Cole and his security forces drove off the remaining raiders. There were casualties, but the station survived. "You were among the more seriously wounded." Laura looked down at Skira again. "She is safe. That is what matters." Xena moved closer, settling into a chair on the opposite side of the bed. "You nearly died protecting a child who was not your own species," she said. "You faced armed raiders with nothing but a maintenance tool and your own body. You refused to surrender even when victory was impossible. Anyone would have done the same." Laura said. "No," Xena replied firmly. "That is precisely the point. Anyone would not have done the same. Most species would have surrendered the child to save themselves. Most species would have calculated the odds and made the logical choice. But humans do not think that way, do they?" Laura did not know how to respond. She had not thought about choices or odds when the raiders attacked. She had only thought about Skira, about keeping her promise, about protecting a frightened child who had nowhere else to turn. "I want to tell you a story," Xena said. "A true story that my people have kept secret for over 300 of your Earth years. It is time you understood why Vrathkar trusted you. Why all Kethrani trust humans with what we hold most precious." Laura listened as Xena spoke. And the story the elder told changed everything. 3 centuries ago, a Kethrani exploration vessel had crashed on Earth during what humans called the medieval period. The adult crew died in the impact, but 3 young cubs survived. They were stranded on an alien world with no way to call for rescue. Surrounded by primitive beings who should have seen them as monsters, a human village found the crash site within days. The villagers were farmers and hunters, simple people who had never imagined that life existed beyond their world. When they discovered the Kethrani cubs, they were terrified. These were creatures from nightmares, with scales and claws and golden eyes that glowed in the darkness. "Our young were injured and starving," Xena continued. "They could not hunt, could not defend themselves. By all logic, the humans should have killed them out of fear or left them to die. Instead, something remarkable happened. The villagers took the cubs into their homes. They fed them, treated their wounds, kept them warm through the winter months. When outsiders came demanding that the demon children be destroyed, the villagers refused. They armed themselves with farming tools and hunting bows and stood against anyone who threatened their adopted young. For 2 years, those humans raised our children as their own," Xena said, her voice heavy with emotion. "They taught them to speak, gave them names, celebrated their growth. When our rescue ships finally arrived, we expected to find corpses. Instead, we found healthy cubs who wept at the thought of leaving." Laura felt tears running down her cheeks. She had not known this history, had never imagined that her species had earned the trust of apex predators so long ago. The villagers mourned when our ships departed. Xena continued. They had loved those cubs, had risked everything to protect them, and they grieved at their loss. Our scouts watched from orbit as the humans held ceremonies and planted trees in memory of the children they had saved. "Why did you keep this secret?" Laura asked. "Because we needed to be certain," Xena replied. "One village could have been an exception, a random act of kindness that meant nothing. So we watched your species for centuries, studying your behavior, testing your instincts. And we found the same pattern everywhere we looked. Humans adopted orphan children, even when they had barely enough resources for their own families. Humans risked their lives for young of other cultures, other nations, other species. Humans built institutions specifically designed to protect and care for children who had no one else. You are the only species in the known galaxy that does this, Xena said. The only species that values the young of others as much as their own. It is not logical, it is not efficient, and yet you do it anyway. Skira stirred beside Lara, her golden eyes blinking open. Lara? She mumbled sleepily. I am here, Lara said softly, reaching over to stroke the child's head. Everything's all right. Xena watched the interaction with something close to reverence. This is why apex predators trust humans, she said. Not because you are strong, not because you are dangerous, but because you will protect any child placed in your care. That instinct is more valuable than claws or scales or centuries of evolution. Does everyone know? Lavra asked. All the apex predator species? Xena nodded. The Kethrani, the Vorn Hunters, the Shadowmane Prides. We all share this knowledge among ourselves. We call your kind the guardians of the young in our ancient tongues. It is a title of highest honor. Lavra looked down at Skira, who had fallen back asleep with her small claws still gripping Laura's sleeve, and finally understood the weight of what Vrathkar had entrusted to her. It was not just his daughter. It was centuries of trust, generations of observed kindness, a sacred bond between apex predators and the soft humans who had earned their respect. I will not let you down, Lavra whispered. To Skira, to Xena, to all the beings who had placed their faith in humanity's protective instincts, Xena rose from her chair and moved toward the door. Rest now, she said. Vrathkar will return soon. He will want to hear everything that happened. Then she was gone, and Lara was left alone with Skira and the incredible knowledge of what her species truly meant to the galaxy. 2 weeks after the raid, Lara stood in the station's main concourse, surrounded by hundreds of beings from dozens of worlds. Her wound had healed enough for her to move freely, though Dr. Henry Shaw had insisted she take another week of light duty. Skira held her hand tightly, the young Kethrani pressing close against Laura's leg as they watched the docking bay doors. Commander, Vrathkar's ship had arrived an hour ago, and word had spread quickly through the station. Everyone wanted to see what would happen when the apex predator warrior returned to find his daughter in the care of a human, especially after the story of Laura's fight against the raiders had become common knowledge. The doors opened, and Vrathkar strode through. He was even more imposing than Lavra remembered, his armored scales gleaming and his golden eyes scanning the crowd until they found his daughter. Father, Skira cried, releasing Laura's hand and running toward the massive warrior Vrathkar, knelt down and caught his daughter in his arms, lifting her up and holding her against his chest. For a moment, the fearsome predator commander looked like nothing more than a relieved parent reuniting with his child, and Lavra felt her heart swell at the sight. Then Vrathkar's eyes found Lara, and he moved toward her with Skira still in his arms. The crowd parted before him, being scrambling to get out of the apex predator's path, but Lavra stood her ground and waited. Xena told me everything, Vrathkar said when he reached her. She told me about the raiders, about how you fought them, about how you nearly died protecting my daughter. I made a promise, Lavra replied. I intended to keep it. Vrathkar studied her for a long moment, his golden eyes unreadable, and then he did something that shocked everyone watching. He bowed his head to her, a gesture of profound respect that Kethrani warriors almost never showed to other species. You have proven everything that my people believed about yours, he said. You have honored the sacred trust between our kinds. Lavra felt the weight of hundreds of eyes upon her. Beings who had dismissed humans as soft prey were now staring at her with something closer to wonder. The story of her fight had spread through the station, had challenged everything they thought they knew about humanity. Skira told me something while we traveled here, Rathkar continued. She told me that she wants to stay in contact with you, that she considers you pack. In Kethrani culture, pack bonds are sacred and permanent. Lavra looked at Skira, who was watching her with hopeful golden eyes. I would be honored, she said. Rathkar reached into a pouch at his belt and withdrew a small object. It was a crystal carved with intricate patterns, hanging from a chain of some dark metal. He held it out to Lara. This is a clan token, he explained. It marks you as clan friend to my family, under our protection for all your days. Any Kethrani who sees this will know that you are one of us in all ways that matter. Lavra accepted the token with trembling hands. She could feel the significance of the moment, could sense that something important was happening beyond just this personal exchange. There is more, Rathkar said, raising his voice so that the entire concourse could hear. I speak now not just as a father, but as a representative of my people. The Kethrani have kept a secret for 3 centuries, and the time has come to share it with the galaxy. The crowd went completely silent. We are not the only apex predator species who know the truth about humans, Rathkar continued. The Vorn hunters know. The Shadowmane prides know. The Draketh clans know. We have all observed humanity, tested their instincts, watched how they treat the young of other species. He paused, letting his words sink in. Humans call themselves prey because they lack claws and fangs and armored scales. Other species dismiss them as soft and weak. But the apex predators of the galaxy know better. We know that humans possess something more valuable than physical weapons. Lavra felt Skira's small hand slip back into hers. The young Kethrani had climbed down from her father's arms and returned to Laura's side. And the symbolism of that choice was not lost on anyone watching. Humans protect young, but are not their own, Rathkar declared. They fight and die for children who share none of their blood. They adopt the orphaned and defend the helpless, even when logic demands they walk away. This instinct is unique in all the known galaxy, and it is why apex predators have trusted humans with our most precious treasures for generations. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Lavra could see expressions of disbelief, of reconsideration, of dawning understanding on faces throughout the concourse. In the ancient tongues of our peoples, we have a name for humanity, Rathkar continued. We call them the guardians of the young. It is a title of highest honor, reserved for those who have proven themselves worthy of absolute trust. He turned back to Lavra. Lavra Bennett has earned this title through blood and sacrifice. She stood against armed raiders with nothing but her own body, refused to surrender a child in her care, and nearly died keeping her promise. She represents the best of what humanity offers to the galaxy. Captain Cole stepped forward from the crowd. I witnessed the aftermath of that fight, he said. 3 raiders, armed and armored, and she held them off with a maintenance wrench. I have seen trained soldiers do less. Other voices joined in. Beings who had heard the story, who had seen Laura's injuries, who had watched her devotion to Skira over the past weeks. The narrative was shifting before Laura's eyes. The perception of humanity transforming from weak prey to something else entirely. Skira tugged at Laura's hand. I will come back, she said. When I'm older, I will come back to visit you. We are packed now. Lavra knelt down to meet the young Kethrani's eyes. I will be here, she promised. Always. Rathkar placed his massive clawed hand on Laura's shoulder. The galaxy is changing, he said quietly. Humans are no longer the soft prey that others dismiss. You are becoming known for what you truly are. The species that protects all young, the guardians that even apex predators trust. As Lavra stood in the concourse with Skira's hand in hers and Rathkar's clan token around her neck, She understood that this moment was bigger than herself. Humanity's reputation in the galaxy was shifting, not because of weapons or technology or conquest, but because of the simple instinct to protect any child in need. In the weeks that followed, requests began arriving at the station. Other apex predator species seeking human caretakers for their young. Ambassadors wanting to establish formal exchange programs. Councils asking for human advisors in matters involving children. Humanity had found their place among the stars, not as predators or prey, but as something the galaxy had never seen before. Guardians who would protect any child from any species, at any cost, and it all started with one human woman who refused to let go of a frightened Kathrani child, no matter what stood against her.